Hi guys, so Rishi Sunak and the Tories are hitting new lows, dipping to lettuce, or should I say Liz Truss levels of unfavourability. But there's another problem the Conservatives are facing. It seems 2016 Brexit voters on the Tory side are flipping to Reform UK. Here Sam Coates from Sky News explains how Farage and Tice continue to damage the Tories, even on an issue that won them an 80-seat majority for the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson back in 2019.
The most recent YouGov poll, which I think is really striking today. Look at this. This is the voting intention according to YouGov, 25 percentage point lead for Labour. This poll is significant for two reasons. First of all, for only the second time, the Tories dropped below 20 to 19 points. And look at this. Reform, highest ever number of 15%, way ahead of the Lib Dems in third place. So that is a very significant result. Now, I think what's really interesting about this poll is why this is. Right, look at this. Wind back to the Brexit referendum, how those voters behaved in the last general election. So these people all voted Brexit in 2016, and they almost all voted Conservative when Boris Johnson was fighting the Get Brexit Done election. Massively in the Tories' favour there. Now, look at how that compares to today. Wow. Reform actually beats the Conservative Party today. The Conservative Party has lost 2016 Leave voters. That is a big problem, and I think the vote's playing to that.
It's extraordinary to see that actually laid out there, and how Reform... Look, I mean, it's important to put it in context. You know, these are not guys who are going to, waltz through winning loads of seats at the next election, but it's fair to say that they could have a real impact on the result.
People in the Tory party are talking about the 1997 precedent. Back then, a sort of precursor to all of the Brexit and Reform Party were called the Referendum Party. Jimmy Goldsmith was its leader. They didn't win seats, but they just chunks of vote away from the Conservatives, delivering the Labour Party dozens more seats than they otherwise would have done. That could well be the impact of poll numbers like this.
There you have it. So you can see here, Leave voters from 2016 now flipping from the Conservatives to Reform UK. And you can see here Reform UK leading 33% to 32% with this cohort. Now, I think it was a clever approach for Reform to rehash the old Brexit Party logo and continue as a sort of legacy party. It was a stroke of genius in a sense, because they, instead of abandoning Brexit, which is a disaster, they have embraced it, and they have realised that, well, the Conservatives have failed at Brexit. No one was going to succeed, but they have been able to sell this idea to the public, or to that small section of society who still think Brexit was a good idea, that it's not been implemented correctly. So the Tories have made an arse of it, and if Reform UK were in charge, or the Brexit Party were in charge, or Nigel Farage was in charge, he would have taken advantage of these Brexit benefits and Britain would be succeeding. So it was a clever move by the Brexit Party, Reform UK, to continue banging away at trying to convince not so much the public that Brexit was a good idea, but convince 2016 Brexit voters who still think Brexit was a good choice, that, well, if they were in charge, they would do a better job. Now, this poll back here that he introduced at the beginning, this is really interesting, because you see here Labour on 44%. This is the new poll. Conservatives have dipped below 20%. This, I think, the second time it's happened. And, there was this expectation that as we get closer to the election, Labour and the Conservatives, that the difference would narrow. But instead what's happening is Labour are increasing their lead and the Conservatives are continuing to decline. Now, of course, what's interesting, with this poll is Reform UK on 15%, up from 10% of some weeks and months back. They're increasing to 15%. Lib Dems 9 and Greens 8. Now, when you look at a poll like this, you think, well, of course, if the Reform UK party is leading the Lib Dems, it means that Reform are going to pick up seats. And perhaps they could pick up as many seats, or almost as many seats, as the Conservatives. Look at the percentages. This doesn't translate into seats, because you have to look at individual constituencies. And remember, it's a two-horse race. when it's either, in many cases, Labour or the Conservatives, or the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats in many cases. So if the Conservatives lose, it's likely to go to Labour or the Liberal Democrats. It's not going to go to Reform, because remember, the alternative to the Conservatives is Reform. So they're going to split the right-wing vote. So it's right-wingers are going to vote for the Conservatives or Reform, while everyone else is going to vote for Labour or the Liberal Democrats. So while the polling for the Reform UK party is pretty good, we'd have to look at individual constituencies, and if they're polling higher than the Conservatives, then there's a chance that they could win the seat, but only if this is a seat that normally goes to the Conservatives. So we're talking about Conservative safe seats flipping to Reform, really, not somewhere in the red wall that we're expecting to flip back to Labour. But Reform UK on 15% means that if there was a change in the electoral system to, for example, proportional representation, they would pick up a significant number of seats in Parliament. But that's another story. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.